Come on inside and get yourself something cool to drink.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to another edition of Between the Lines podcast from yours truly, Lost in Translation podcast on the Black Man Unfiltered Network. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight we have a treat for you. Tonight is part 2 of a 3-part series that I've been working on, and we've been discussing myths about marriage and money and the things that make it go round. Do people get married for love, or do they get married for security and for money? Tonight, we're going to do a little bit of both. We're going to pick up where we left off from last week, and I want to go ahead and dovetail a little bit about what's going on. But before we get started, I'm going to go ahead and recognize everybody who came in and showed some love already. Let's go ahead. We got Jugs, ex-promoter. He said, just spreading the word. Thank you. Pretty appreciate it. Then we also have Miss Lux. Miss Lux in the building. To the smile. How you doing, darling? Appreciate you coming on in. And of course, you know, we got Black Man Unfiltered in the building, watching from the clouds. Yes, indeed. Tonight, we're going to talk about marriage and some of the myths that come with it. And I like to discuss last week, man, when we get on these panels and we start talking about these myths that come out of nowhere that really don't serve us when it comes down to marriage. And it's important for us to do a deep dive to find out exactly where this stuff came from, so we'll know exactly how to handle it when we come in contact with other people, so we can teach them and re-educate. That's the whole purpose of us wanting to make sure we have solution-based systems in place to help people out when they run against somebody who has false information or information that they got that they don't know is wrong. So that's the main point. One of the things I'm going to talk to you guys a little bit about is the purpose of marriage. We're going to dovetail a little bit about being able to be honest and with one another and that type of thing. But before we get started, I'm going to go ahead and introduce you guys to a little bit about what's going on. This weekend was past, I think it was Mother's Day weekend. And also there was this little thing that was going on TikTok. It was called Ginger Talk. So basically what happened was our redhead brothers and sisters, and of course, you know, I'm a redhead too, on the other side found out that they were black too. And I'm going to show you guys exactly how that jumped off and how that dovetails into what we're talking about tonight. So I'm going to go ahead and bring that video up.
Hair, that's a black man. You see a white woman with red hair, that's a black woman. Gingers are black. All gingers. I just need to remind y'all again, everyone who is ginger, who has red hair, those are black people. All gingers are black people. If they have red hair, they are black. You see a white man with red hair, that's a black man. You see a white woman with red hair, that's a black woman. Gingers are black.
All right, that's how they got started. So of course, you know, we had people who had a little bit of fun about it. And of course, you know, I had to get in on it. Is another guy that we ran across when I was scrolling, and he was making fun of it. So he posted one of my comments, and that thing blew up on TikTok.
I love this comment. Actually, a little known fact, we get a new freckle for every black person that accepts us. And once we have enough freckles, our transformation shall be complete.
And of course, you know, we had some brothers chiming in as well, too, talking about, you know, hey, man, now that you think about it, I think you might be right.
The salt pepper beard. Got the gold chain with the button up, man. That's flavor right there. He could be my daddy. Look. It all makes sense. Oh my gosh, it all makes sense. Now you can't tell me that's not a black man right there, man. Growing up, I always used to watch Bob Ross paint, and I was like, he got some flavor to him, man. He just a soul brother from another mother. He can't tell me that's not. He got a nice fro, got the salt pepper beard, got the gold chain with the button up, man. That's flavor right there. He could be my daddy. Look.
And then after that, this is when it really took a turn, when we start hearing from the other community about exactly what happened and start sharing their stories. And this one particular guy kind of got into the field, so I'm going to go ahead and show you this one as well too, because I thought this was interesting.
In all seriousness, with the trend going on, all gingers are black. I have not felt this much love ever in my life. And to the girl that's making this go viral, I just gotta say thank you. Thank you for the love. But honestly, truthfully, thank you, all of you. I hated being a redhead growing up because I was that kid in special ed who couldn't read, who couldn't write, and I also had red hair. I had a stutter, and now I grew up to be pretty successful. But I never felt loved. But until tonight, like, oh my gosh. So to the girl who made this go super viral, if you're ever in Dallas, Texas, let's go to dinner. You name it, I'll pay for it and I'll take you. My mother's coming too. So thank you all. I love you. Like I seriously, I am mind blown by this, like no other. Thank you.
So that got me to thinking, if we're so good at showing complete strangers love, then how come we can't do the same thing for each other? You know? And I started examining it. And I think it may be due to the fact that we have preconceived notions on how things should go. I've listened to a lot of panels where people say, I wasn't really raised to be a wife, or I really wasn't raised to be a husband. But for some strange reason, we show love to complete strangers. We don't even know who they are. And they felt the love, you know what I'm saying? Out of nowhere. And to them, it was like amazing because they went so long being ridiculed and being ostracized and not being visible, you know, until all of a sudden they're being seen. Now, Black people as well, we've gone through a little bit of that too, being marginalized and that type of thing. So I think that's probably the main reason why we could relate to one another. And I think all this thing boils down to is being able to relate to one another and to leave old habits behind and to start new ones. But first we have to be honest with each other and we have to educate ourselves. So tonight we're going to do a little both. My whole reasoning for this whole thing, to start it off, is I ran across a Bible verse, which is going to be the basis for this evening's show. And it's called Genesis 2:24. Therefore shall a man leave his father and mother and shall cleave to his wife, and they shall become one flesh. Now, the concept of this is leaving and cleaving is seen as an honoring of God's design for marriage, leading to blessings and freedom for the couple. And see, here's the thing. A lot of times people think that freedom is not an option when you get married. Well, here's the thing. Being married is the ultimate freedom. And I think we probably need to discuss that a little bit further. I remember when me and my brothers went to go see my grandfather. It was a little bit after our dad passed. And he sat us down. It was time to have the talk with the fellas, seeing as we were the legacy going forward. And he said, you know, I know your dad taught you how to be a man. I'm going to teach you why to be a man. And he asked us one simple question. He asked us, why do you think, you know, people get married? And of course, you know, I think I'm having all the answers there for love. He said, that ain't it. He said, it ain't love. He said, the reason why people get married is to have somebody to have the hard times to go through with. Now, me being around 18, 19 years old, I ain't been through nothing. You know what I'm saying? So the message didn't really hit hard. You know what I mean? Now I'm 51. Now I know exactly what that means, you know? So it's up to me to make sure that I share this information with a lot of people who are just like me in that particular situation and pass that knowledge on and to say, hey, look, this is what that means. Now, but first, before we do that, we have to undo the things that we've learned, especially if it's wrong. And for some strange reason, when people get married, they think that they should be separated in their finances, separated in their thought, you know, that type of thing. That's the Bible even tells you you're supposed to be clean together, become one flesh. That's not to say that you can't have your own autonomy. Not to say that you can't have your own thoughts and will and that type of thing, but it is a certain freedom that allow you to be the best version of yourself, especially if you get with somebody who you grow with and they can watch your growth and they can appreciate your growth. Now, one of the main reasons why a lot of people get married is for security. And sometimes we don't really get down to the nuts and bolts of why people believe what they believe. So tonight, I'm going to go ahead and pick up where we left off from a show called Woman that we had last week from the 70s. And it brought up a lot of interesting points on how we believe what we believe today and how that carries on to what we believe. And I'm going to go ahead and bring that up, and we're going to talk about it a little bit. We're going to have us a little pop quiz at the end. But I think I'm going to go ahead and walk this through. So I want you guys to take a look and see. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen.
Woman, an in-depth exploration of the world of women today with Sandra Elkin.
Good evening and welcome to Woman. Our topic tonight is credit. My guest this evening is from the Center for Women Policy Studies in Washington, D.C. The center researches action projects and litigation in the field of women's rights. Recently, with the help of the Ford Foundation, they undertook a study of legal and economic barriers to women obtaining credit. With me tonight is Nancy Polikoff, assistant to Margaret Gates, co-director of the Center for Women Policy Studies. Nancy is currently investigating the availability of credit to women. Welcome to the show, Nancy.
Thanks, Sandy.
Have you generally found that there is discrimination in the area of credit?
Oh, I think it goes without saying, and the other women's groups and groups that have worked in the area have found the same thing.
What are the major areas of credit discrimination?
Well, there's discrimination in obtaining retail credit, which includes department store credit cards, bank credit cards. Then there's consumer loans and home financing and mortgage loans, as well as business loans and educational loans.
What have you found are the barriers to equal credit opportunity for women?
In some cases, it's state laws in the area of property, such as community property laws, or some domestic relations laws, which are used as reasons why women are not considered creditworthy. But by and large, it's false assumptions about women, which make it more difficult for women to get credit than it is for men.
What do you mean by false assumptions about women?
Well, there's a feeling, especially directed towards married women, that because they're married, they will naturally get pregnant. And because they get pregnant and have children, they will naturally leave the workforce. That kind of an assumption makes it very difficult for a working married woman to be taken as seriously as a working married man is in the credit field.
Let's get specific and get into some of the areas that you mentioned. How about credit cards?
Well, I think the major problem with credit cards comes not from single women who get credit cards pretty easily, but with married women and formerly married women.
Uh-oh, did y'all hear that? There's another myth that she just busted. It wasn't so much as single women able to get credit cards. It's married women. So I think married women were actually looking at this as a hindrance to getting credit in their name. Now, my question is this: what was the purpose of having separate credit? Is it to build up the family or to have your own? Those are some of the things we really have to take a look at. But that first myth right there was what got busted. That just stood out to me, where she said it wasn't so much as the single women getting credit. They can get that no problem, you know. So the next time you're on somebody's panel and they're saying that, you know, women couldn't do this and couldn't do that, this is proof right here that single women could do that. But here's my other question is, why are they making it difficult for married women to have their own credit profile? And that may be the catalyst for some reasons why a lot of women who wanted to get divorced so they can have their own autonomy. So we're going to talk about this in just a moment. I just thought I'd stop that just to point that out.
Married women will find that if they've had credit while single, the creditor is very reluctant to not to reissue credit in the husband's name. A woman who changes her name when she gets married will find that a new application is sent to her and she'll be required to reapply with all sorts of information about her husband, and a new card will come with her husband's name on it and not her own, in which case she's lost her credit account. It's no longer hers, it's really her husband's.
Well, what should she do?
Well, in that particular instance, there's one thing she can do. If she doesn't change her name upon marriage, there's no reason to notify her creditors that she's gotten married. Men certainly don't think to do that. If she does change her name, she can be very firm about insisting that the card is issued in her first name and her new last name. If there's a new application issued to her, she should refuse to fill out the information that would thereby make the card issued in her husband's name. And if they do issue a card in her husband's name, which they may do anyway, she should send it back and demand that she get her own card in her own name.
What if a woman changes her marital status the other way, goes from married to divorced?
Well, the problem is usually a little bit different, because women, when they're married, usually use their husband's credit. They usually have a credit card that reads Mrs. John Smith instead of Mrs. Mary Smith. If they have had cards reading Mrs. Mary Smith, they need not notify their creditor that they're divorced. But if all of their credit has been in their husband's name, they're what's called in the credit world a new face. And when they apply for credit, it's as if they never had anything to do with their husband's credit, even if they've paid the bills for years. There isn't a big way out of this, except hopefully through the legislation that will prohibit discrimination on the basis of marital status, because they are applying for credit for the first time. And unless the good that they've contributed to the credit rating of the marriage is counted, they will be considered to have had no credit background.
So marital status is a condition for credit, or at least a consideration by creditors.
Well, it certainly is. I mean, there's a slot for marital status on credit applications, and they do take into account, either in their objective criteria or more likely in just their subjective attitudes, what marital status you are. For example, the assumption that divorced people are unstable, no matter who you are. That seems to be a pretty widespread assumption.
There's a process called credit scoring, is that right?
Right.
Would you explain what that is?
Well, credit scoring, probably you've seen in newspapers, banks frequently will be advertising to get loan customers, and they will put forward a sort of a questionnaire. It looks like a lot of fun to fill out, and you get points for the different answers, and you're actually rating your creditworthiness according to certain objective criteria. These systems frequently discriminate against women, sometimes in subtle ways and sometimes in not so subtle ways. One of the subtle ones is that you frequently get an extra point or two if you have a phone listed in your own name. Well, most married women do not have phones listed in their own names. The phone is in their husband's name. Therefore, they lose 2 points simply because their husband is the person who has a phone in his own name. There's also frequently marital status becomes a factor, because when you have to check off your marital status between single, married, divorced, separated, and widowed, everything gets 1 point, but married gets 2 points. So if you're married, you're automatically ahead of the game in terms of your credit worth.
Let me ask you another question. Why do you think they give you 2 points for being married? Because basically there's two incomes coming in. And this was asked, I'm going to just take a moment to just take a breather for a moment so we can gather our thoughts. And this was asking, how old is this? And this is from 1974. And the reason why I brought it up is because sometimes stereotypes or myths are one of those things that's kind of hard to prove. So what we did was we had to dig into the archives and find out exactly where this information came from. So it makes it easier for us to figure out exactly why people think the way that they think. So if we can show them in real time exactly what these people were thinking, we can actually take a look at what has happened since then to see if we should actually make any type of changes or if we can look for better solutions or something like that. So that's the main reason why we want to make sure we educate people instead of just yelling at people, and telling people to submit, as y'all would love to say. And my whole thing is this: I want to make sure that we get to the point where we have dialogue, and it's also based in truth as well. So that's the main reason why we're showing this particular video. And also, I think somebody had put on, he said, plus being married means you can add to the income of the household on the application for credit, which helps your chances. That is absolutely correct. They want to make sure that income is backed up. But here's the thing: there's going to be some issues with that as well too, going forward as we go into it. It's also said marriage means that there's a second person, the company that can jump in to pay the debt. Absolutely correct. And also, Lou Medic says easy to pay the bill. That's correct. And Anissa was like, yeah, she understands. She said, okay. So I just thought we'd take a breather for right there so we can just level set for those who just came in so they can understand exactly why we're playing this, so we can get an understanding of where this information came from and was it beneficial and was it not? And if we need to, what kind of changes can we make?
Worthiness, according to most credit scoring systems.
Well, are there different criteria for men and for women?
Well, in a sense, I guess the credit scoring system is one example whereby it's more likely that a man will have a phone in his name than it is for a woman. And I would say that on applications where you have to put down information about your spouse, there will be circumstances under which they will consider the husband's information differently from the way that they'll consider the wife's information if the husband is applying for credit. And also in terms of co-signers for loans, which is frequently a problem, a man who has a good income is not liable to be required to have a loan co-signed by his wife unless it involves land and there's legal title reasons. But a woman applying for a loan, no matter what her income, may be required to have a male co-signer, even somebody like a 75-year-old father on Social Security, or a teenage son, or a former husband.
What is the difference between, say, a divorced woman applying for a house, a mortgage for her house that she wants to buy, and a single woman? Is there a difference?
Well, they're both probably in trouble. Single women are in trouble applying for mortgage loans because of some of the false assumptions we talked about earlier. It's assumed that a single woman will marry, and that when she marries, she'll follow her husband to wherever he lives, and therefore leave the house. It's also assumed that a single woman, because she's a woman, doesn't know how to keep up property the way a man does. Those are some of the assumptions that make it difficult for us.
Uh-oh. Anissa, you see that, don't you? They already think y'all don't like cutting grass. And we talked about that earlier, how you don't want to cut no grass. So this is older than me. So I thought I'd point that one out. But that was one of the things that they were talking about as far as women applying for mortgages. And I think that echoes to what we're doing now. There's this sentiment that more women are buying houses now. And during the credit process, these people were actually putting up barriers because they would say that she would actually leave her own home or her own mortgage responsibility for her house and move in with her husband. So those are some of the barriers that they were facing back then. So I thought I'd point that out as well, too, because some of this stuff still echoes on what's going on today.
Single woman to get a mortgage loan. A divorced woman who has a difficult time getting credit in just about any area, it may have a doubly difficult time in the mortgage area because creditors are so reluctant to take risks.
What about a married woman who works and has an income and applies with her husband for a mortgage?
Well, that's the area that's gotten a lot of attention because of the outrages in it. A couple who apply for a loan will frequently be told that the wife's income or that one of their incomes must be discounted, either not counted at all or discounted a certain percentage. And this again goes back to the assumption that because she's a woman, she will get pregnant. And because she will get pregnant, she will have children. Because she will have children, she will leave the workforce, and that therefore they will default on the mortgage. Nobody's heard of a default due to pregnancy, but that seems to be the rationale behind discounting the wife's income. So what's happened until recently, and is still going on, we understand, is that women are actually required to sign written affidavits saying that they're following a prescription, a physician prescribed form of birth control. Frequently they're using the pill or some other known to be effective contraceptive before they'll be granted, before their incomes will be counted. It's also been known to be required that a woman write on that same letter that if she gets pregnant, she'll have an abortion. That seems to be how sure creditors are that pregnancy will lead to ultimate default.
Uh-oh. Houston, we have a problem. Here's my thing. I think there may be something that may be lost in this. And I think the creditors probably should have explained this a little bit better. Yeah, I know. I was looking at the same thing, I could tell you. I think the real reason why they really only want to use one person's income is to what we talked about earlier at the beginning of the show. The reason why people get married is to make sure that you have somebody that have the hard times to go through with. I think a lot of times in our communities, we like to basically do what's known as keep up with the Joneses. We want to make sure that we extend the full breadth of the money that we make to get as big a house as we can, or live a bigger lifestyle as we can. The smart thing to do when you first get married is to get a house based on one person's income, and then therefore you can actually save money or do other things like investments, that type of thing, or go on better vacations, that type of thing. So that way you're not house poor. And I think sometimes when people get extended too far, where you have two people having their credit, they'll, instead of them getting a $200,000 house, they would be like, okay, we can get a $400,000 house. Well, what happens when one person gets sick? Or what happens is if one person dies? Of course, you have insurance, that type of thing. Or what happens if you get divorced? You know, those are some of the real things that people don't take into consideration when it comes to overextending yourself as far as being house poor. But in this particular case, she's saying that they're discriminating against women because they may have a child or children, and she may not work, and they'll default on the loan. And in this one, which is I didn't know, that they made them sign affidavits saying that they will take prescriptions to take measures to make sure she doesn't get pregnant. Now, to me, I don't think that the bank should be talking about what's going on in your bedroom, but that's just me. The less information they know, it's really not their business what you do in your bedroom. But at the end of the day, I think it's just smart to make sure that you live a lifestyle accordingly instead of overextending yourself. But in this particular situation, the way she was looking at it and she thought about it is because women are being discriminated against. Instead of thinking that the bank is thinking, hey, we need to make sure that, we have something backing this up, this collateral backing this up, or promise to pay, or guarantee that this is going to happen. So I think a lot is that. I think 2008 taught us a lot about people overextending themselves with mortgages, and I think y'all already know how that happens. So leading up to this, from this to 2008, I can certainly see how that mentality of wanting to overextend yourself would lead to the mortgage-backed securities situations that we had in 2008, where a lot of people were giving up their homes. So I thought I would definitely point that out, because hindsight is always 20/20, and I want to get us in the habit of using foresight. And in order for us to do that, we have to make sure that we practice looking and see what happened in the past, and to see how we could have avoided having particular situations like this. So this is the TV show that was aired in the 70s for those who were caught up, called Woman. It's from 1974, and they talked about different women's issues and that type of thing. So this is where that information came from. A lot of the talking points that you see, these are some of the things that show up, and you don't necessarily know where these people got it from. This is where it came from. So I thought I'd share that with you guys. We're going to go ahead and continue on.
You know of actual cases where this has happened?
Oh yes. One of the women who became most active in the field of credit discrimination got into it because she was required to write such a letter before she and her husband could get a mortgage.
What recourse does a woman have You've listed several ways that women are discriminated against. There must be some recourse, isn't there?
Well, there are some state laws now. 22 states and the District of Columbia have laws that prohibit some kind of discrimination in the area of credit. Not all of them are as inclusive as they could be, but they do provide some kind of recourse, and we don't really know how effective they're all being because some of them are very recent, and the oldest of them are no more than 2 or 3 years old. So there hasn't been a whole lot of litigation or any kind of action involving these suits. Frequently, we find that a woman who's discriminated against need only find somebody who sounds like they have authority to make a phone call to a vice president or somebody higher up than the person who turned her down, and she'll get her credit. So that frequently there's a process of conciliation that goes on that makes it easy for the woman ultimately to get credit if she's willing to fight a little bit.
Is there one really good state law that is sort of a model, or?
Well, we would say that a state law that would be really good would cover discrimination both on the basis of sex and marital status, in order to cover that mortgage situation that we previously discussed, and that it would apply to all creditors, that it would cover consumer credit and would cover home financing and wouldn't leave any loopholes there. And as far as we can tell, there are several states with laws like that. Although the enforcement provisions are frequently what holds states back from having really good laws. Administrative remedies are usually handled through Human Rights Commission. And if somebody's discriminated against, she can file a complaint with her Human Rights Commission. They will investigate it and do something about it. But since these remedies are frequently ineffective, depending on the state and the Human Rights Commission, it is a good idea for a state law to have a private right of action in it also, hopefully providing for attorney's fees so that there's no problem in women who are discriminated against not being able to afford to go to court and get their rights. And we found one state in particular, the state of Washington, where not only were all of those elements present, but they had gone one step further, and a step that seems to be very necessary, and that is that they're educating both the public and the creditors to know what the law requires of them. A woman named Wanda Fulner has set up credit schools, and these credit schools are actually seminars that she takes to various creditors in all aspects of credit, teaching them what they must do now to comply with the law. Then they have brochures for women and now groups who monitor the law. And it looks like the women in Washington not only have a law that's good, but they know that they have a law and they know what their rights are. And they can use that law more effectively than somebody who may have a law and not know that it exists due to lack of publicity.
Would the Equal Rights Amendment help?
The Equal Rights Amendment may help. It's still unclear, but the Equal Rights Amendment applies only to state action, and a private department store, for example, is not likely to be reached. On the other hand, a federally chartered and insured bank might well be. There is some litigation now under the 14th Amendment to the Constitution, which has the same state action requirement, and presumably the outcome of against the bank, and presumably the outcome of that will be indicative as to what the courts will do under the Equal Rights Amendment.
What about education loans? Are women discriminated against in that area?
Well, the answer.
Here we go. This is one of those things that's recent. You know what I'm saying? As Kevin used to say.
I'm a PhD.
Yeah. We got a problem with student loan debt. And this is the beginning of where that took place. I want y'all to pay close attention to what's going on in this particular segment, because we already know the talking point for this one: the most enrolled, most educated, the most in debt. This is where that indebted part comes from. So I thought I'd pause to let you guys take a breather. Well up, CJ, I see you in the house, man. Appreciate you for showing up. So I thought I'd let you guys take a look at that.
Is a qualified yes, and the reason it's qualified is because there's so little data available, both in the area of educational loans and in the area of business loans to women. It's simply a question of no one ever bothering to keep the statistics, or keeping very haphazard statistics and not having them available. For example, it doesn't do much good to know that women are X% of all loans if you don't know how many women applied for them, and there is no data available on the number on the sex of the applicants. Therefore, it's hard to tell exactly what kind of discrimination is happening. Just in terms of sheer figures, it's clear that men are making out better than women are.
Do you feel there are repercussions from all of this? Do you feel that women are suffering?
Well, we live in a very credit-oriented society. I think that goes without saying, and there's no sense that women should have credit so that they can use money haphazardly. There's no sense that anybody should have credit for that reason, but women need credit for this to achieve the same economic clout that men have with credit, and to make their lives easier the way credit makes the lives easier for anybody who needs it.
You know what? I was thinking the same thing, Finesse Visions. He said, wait, so you can't track it, but it's clear. That is perfect. See, here's the thing about numbers. The funny thing about numbers, man, if you don't have all the numbers, then they really don't matter, you know. She made a good point about those who were actually applying and those who actually got it. That's a big difference. You know what I'm saying? How many women do we actually know apply for loans, and how many were turned down? That is a huge, huge difference in numbers. So that's the main reason why I was thinking, is it clear? Is it not clear? If you don't have all the information, it's kind of hard to make a good judgment call. So that's a good point, Howard.
But of course, in the areas of education and in the areas of housing, it's a lot more than just making life easier. It may be a crucial difference between a whole standard of living for a lifetime.
Can you explain very carefully, very precisely, and very specifically what women can do to prevent some of these things happening to themselves?
Well, the first thing we'd like to see happen is for creditors to change their policies, but that's not going to happen until women start acting. We mentioned before what women can do when they go from being single to being married. That is a kind of protection. Applying for credit cards when you're single will be a lot easier than applying for them when you're married, and therefore, if you expect to get married, you might apply for credit while you're still single, and thereby avoid the hassle you'd have to go through of being a married woman applying for them. And then,
is there any particular kind of credit that's better? Are credit cards better, or take out a loan when you're single and pay it back? Is that a better thing to do?
I don't think so. I think anything that you do that establishes yourself as a credit-worthy person is helpful. I suppose that the more substantial the credit is, the better you'll be viewed later on. But every little bit is helpful, and there's nothing worse than writing down on your credit application that you have no credit experience whatsoever. That's when you'd be treated with the closest scrutiny.
What about a married woman? Is there something, say she doesn't have a credit rating of her own? What can she do to try to get one?
Well, she can start. The next charge account that she wants, she can apply for in her own name, or she can request a change. For example, if there's a department store that she shops at and she has a credit card that she's been using in the name of Mrs. John Smith, she can apply for her own account, or apply for a new account in her own name, so that credit card, which she's been using all alone, will now read Mrs. Mary Smith, and then it will be her credit. Of course, we have to make clear that we are talking about wives who are credit worthy. In other words, not wives of men who are working, but women who are working or have some other source of income, so that in their own right, they're entitled to have credit in their own names. And if they are in such a position and they establish themselves with a credit rating, then they're protected against the problem that befalls too many women upon the death of their husbands or upon divorce, which is that they're in a crisis period of their lives when they need credit and when it's most difficult to get it, and they are a new face. A woman will find upon divorce that if she and her husband have maintained a good credit rating, it will not follow her but that if there's been a bad credit rating, even if it's the husband's fault, it will follow her. It's a double bind that women are in right now, and the only way out of it, until we can fight it through the courts and through laws, is for married women to have credit in their own names, so that in the event of death or divorce, they're not a new credit face.
If there are certain bills that you pay as a wife and you pay them regularly and you're responsible for them because you have a job, that doesn't help?
No, you might think it would, but as long as that credit is in the husband's name, if it's an automobile loan and it's the woman's car and she's made every payment on it, if the loan is in his name and the car is in his name, it's not going to count to the credit world that she wrote the checks. They just look at the face of the loan and see that it's.
All right, I'm gonna stop right there, because sometimes nuance is everything. She said that it doesn't count if she wrote the checks. But my thing is this: did she make the money? Did she pay the bill? You know, I think that's important, because when you're talking credit worthiness, when you're borrowing money, they want to make sure that you're able to pay it back. And I think sometimes we don't take into consideration that the freedoms that we enjoy, say for instance, if the only bill she had to pay was her car note and she didn't have to pay rent or mortgage or, other stuff, you know what I mean, that may come up. And all of a sudden, the only thing that she's able to pay for is the car. Is that really credit worthy? She got to have somewhere to stay. She got to have somewhere to garage the vehicle. So I think finessing the system is not where we want to be. And especially, I question why married women want to have a second and separate face, so to speak, and to open up a charge account for the purpose of actually having a credit face is okay. But my thing is when you spend the money, it should be discussed between the both of you. Because I'm pretty sure if he spent money, she would want to know exactly what's going on, because he's the provider, of course, in certain situations. And even if she did contribute equally or more, that is still a conversation that needs to be had. So the whole thing about having separate accounts and separate monies and separate things, as long as it's for the benefit of the whole, I don't have a problem with that. But if it's in the benefit for separating, then I think a deeper conversation needs to be had.
It's his and not hers.
Is the only answer federal legislation, do you feel?
I think that's the best answer.
Is there some pending now?
There is legislation in Congress. A law passed the Senate last summer, which was one of the amendments to the Truth in Lending Act, which had a provision prohibiting discrimination on the basis of sex and marital status. It's now in a subcommittee of the House and is being considered. And we hope that there'll be legislation out before the end of the year, and that will give unified national basis for fighting credit discrimination.
What are some of the reasons that creditors give for not extending equal credit to women?
Well, some of the reasons they give are that women are less stable than men, that women are not permanent forces in the work, permanent factors in the workforce, which of course is completely false these days. Creditors frequently assume that a working woman is there temporarily until marriage, or if she's married, she's there until childbirth. The statistics prove that these assumptions are just false, that women don't stop working when they get married automatically. And whatever statistics, of course, are true about the class even, are not necessarily true about individual women. And when the credit determination process is very much a process of weighing the individual, and there really should be no place in it for mass prejudice against a class of people.
So it's your feeling that...
Here's another thing that I think she might have left out too. She said that these conversations are nuanced. You got to pay attention, y'all. She said that there was no guarantee that the woman would continue to work when she got married. So back then it was commonplace if a woman got married, she would come home. Well, in this particular situation, she said that's not true. Sometimes women will still work. The thing that she left out was, if she gets pregnant, will she continue to work? And we already know the answer to that. No. You need time to heal and recover. You know what I'm saying? Sometimes it may take 6 weeks, sometimes 2 months. It depends on what happened during the pregnancy. Sometimes it can be longer than that. So the rationale to what the creditors were thinking is probably something they should talk about. But I think when she left that out on purpose, I think that was disingenuous. And those are the things that lead to misunderstanding in conversations when we have these particular conversations. Because she left it out, and I don't think the host caught her and said, well, what about when she gets pregnant? That's what she should have asked her. But of course, she looking out for the sisterhood. She's going to conveniently not ask her or follow up that question, which I think is a powerful question to ask.
Women are not proven bad credit risks.
On the contrary, what studies do exist show women to be very good credit risks. Of course, those are the studies of women who have obtained credit, and because of past discrimination, they've probably been very highly qualified women. But there's no data that anybody's been able to show indicating that women are, in general, are worse credit risks than men.
Have there been lots of credit discrimination test cases in the courts?
No, there's one that I know of that I mentioned resting on the 14th Amendment that doesn't even have to do with the state law. But by and large, credit discrimination is being approached as a conciliatory process. One phone call is frequently enough to get a woman credit. Now, that's good for the individual woman and may be bad for broad-based change, because one woman obtaining credit is not much of a precedent. The store or the bank can go back to their same discriminatory policies and only sort of give in when they're caught. But that seems to be the trend these days, towards writing a letter or making a phone call and getting an individual woman her credit.
In other words, let me speak to the manager. That's where that came from. I would like to speak to the manager. That's exactly where that came from. So she's right in that aspect. So we should have something in place where all women shouldn't have to go through that.
But Nancy, what are credit reporting agencies?
Credit reporting agencies, or credit bureaus, maintain massive files on individuals' creditworthiness and are used by various creditors in determining whether or not to extend credit to women. The problem with most credit reporting agencies in terms of sex discrimination is that they will lump a married man and a married woman in the same file. There has recently been passed a law in California that specifically states that if a married couple wish separate files kept by a credit reporting agency, that agency must do so. Procedures like that are absolutely crucial in order to ensure that a married woman will in fact be considered a separate credit entity, or else she faces the same problems that she might face, that, for example, upon divorce, they'll look at the file and see that the husband's bad credit rating will go along, but that the good credit rating, which may have been developed by the couple, will not go along, because it's not presumed that the woman contributes to that. If she has her own separate file, then there can be no doubt whether she's been a bad or good credit risk.
One of the things you were talking about earlier, and I'd mentioned to you that I'd seen some ads in several magazines inviting women to apply for credit and stating that the company did not discriminate.
Well, I suppose I'm a little cynical, but I don't place too much faith in those ads. They're a very good PR job for that particular company. There have been numerous complaints lately from women who have applied to one of the major credit card companies that had such an advertising campaign, saying that they applied and that they met the objective criteria, which essentially was a certain salary level, and that they were nevertheless denied. I don't think it's any proof from the fact that a creditor participates in such a advertising campaign that creditor has really changed the credit policies. It's certainly not sufficient to prove that that's happened.
A term that I've heard a lot is family expense statute and necessary clause. And I haven't any idea what they are, but I know that they're important to this issue.
Well, they're important because the support laws have been used by creditors as a reason for denying married women credit in their own names. The creditor has said, if we give this woman credit and she defaults on her debts, or even if she doesn't, her husband is responsible for paying them because the law says that a husband has a duty to support his wife.
Uh-oh, did y'all hear that?
Did you hear what I said?
The husband has a duty to support his wife. Yes, they have laws in place that say it is a husband's duty to support his wife. And they will make you do it too. Yeah, if she messes up the money, you're still responsible. So I thought I'd point that one out too, because I think a lot of times people don't think that, they want to be the leader, or they want to be the partner, or they want to be all this other stuff. But at the end of the day, it all comes back down to the man, because he is responsible ultimately for the household. So I thought I'd point that out.
Well, first of all, the support laws are not generally interpreted to have anything to do with the marriage relationship while it exists. And there are several court cases holding that a woman who voluntarily undertakes an obligation based on her own ability to pay can't be relieved of that obligation because of support laws. Those support laws, by the way, extend to necessaries. They don't extend to everything a married woman buys, but to those things which are considered necessaries. Now, necessaries you may think are food and shelter and clothing, but in fact, they're anything necessary to maintain the standard of living, so that there have been at least one case where a fur coat was said to be a necessary because the husband and wife were used to living in a certain style.
There we go. This is where the infamous standard of living came from. When people get divorced and they get these huge settlements, this is where this came from. I'm used to living in, $30,000 mansions or $30 million mansions and stuff like that. So that's where that came from. So if you want to know why these guys are getting fleeced, and people like Jeff Bezos are coming up off of half his fortune, that's the reason why, because lifestyle. So are we talking, marriage, or are we talking lifestyle? I think that is a question that needs to be asked.
Family expense statutes, which are in existence in about half of the states, almost half, say that for expenses of the family, either a husband or a wife can be held liable. In those states, creditors have very little excuse for using the already flimsy excuse of support laws for denying women credit.
Nancy, do you think it's always clear to women when discrimination is taking place?
Well, I would have thought so up until recently, but I've talked to a number of women and read some things that women have written in, and it has become clear that for some reason women are so used to being second-class citizens that sometimes it's just unclear when discrimination is taking place. For example, a woman who applies for a charge account at a department store, having no idea that getting a card in her husband's name means that she isn't receiving the credit. Well, that is discrimination. She is not getting credit that she deserves. Yet she may think that the card that says Mrs. John Smith really means means her and not her husband.
That's the question I want to ask. She says she doesn't get the credit she deserves. What exactly does that mean? I think that is something that gets thrown around in our conversations a lot. I deserve this. I deserve that. You deserve what you pay for, what you earn, that type of thing. So you can't really deserve something if somebody else gave it to you, or if somebody else earned that money. You didn't deserve that. That was a gift. So I think she probably needs to be a little bit more clear when she says she deserves, because if she worked for it, she earned it on her own. Yes, she deserves that. And I wholeheartedly agree with that. But when they have these conversations, they need to make that stuff plain and clear so that the audience understands exactly what she means and it's not vague.
It doesn't.
Is there one single most common mistake that women make most frequently when dealing with this situation?
In terms of credit problems?
Yes.
Well, I guess only naivete that I can think of, the idea that there is no discrimination. Women who apply for credit nowadays ought to be aware that the discriminatory policies are still strong and still go on, and that receiving credit in their own name is what counts, and that it is in their area perhaps illegal to discriminate. If it's illegal, then they ought to know their rights and know that there's a place to go to get some
Nancy,
kind of
I'm
rights.
sorry we're out of time. I thank you very much for being here. Good night, and thank you for watching Women.
All right, gang. As you can see, there's a lot of nuance in that type of stuff. Now, I wanted to touch on some of the, before we wrap it up, I'll touch on some of the things you were talking about discriminating against women and their marital status. This is what's known as Regulation B. Spousal signatures, that says, of the Regulation B generally provides the creditor shall not require the signature of an applicant's spouse who is a not joint applicant on any credit instrument if the applicant qualifies on his or her own, unless certain specified exceptions are met. When the spouse's signature is necessary as a matter of state law to provide a secured creditor access to collateral, that's very important. Collateral is important, y'all, in the event of default, or to give an unsecured creditor access to property otherwise relied upon in the event of a death or default, or when the spouse is providing credit support because the primary applicant does not meet the creditor's lending standards. Yes, banks are allowed to have standards, but as discussed below, when the additional party is needed, a creditor may not require that to be a spouse. Interesting. Now, the next one, this is the credit discrimination against married women. Credit discrimination against married women refers to the denial of credit and offering less than favorable credit terms to women solely because of their marital status. Historical context: prior to 1970s, married women faced significant barriers in accessing credit. Lenders often require women to have their husbands co-sign loans or credit applications regarding their own credit worthiness. Some lenders even discounted a married woman's income or refused to consider it when evaluating credit applications. Single, divorced, and widow women also face discrimination, and sometimes being denied credit altogether or offered less favorable terms compared to men with similar financial profiles. And also, it talks about the Equal Credit Opportunity Act, ECOA, enacted in 1974. So this is the reason why I like to bring all this stuff into context, so you guys know exactly where this stuff comes from. So this video is from 74. This Equal Credit Opportunity Act was from 1974 as well too. And it made it illegal to discriminate against credit applicants based upon sex and or marital status. The ECOA was later amended to include additional protected classes such as race, color, religion, national origin, age, and receipt of public assistance. So they couldn't discriminate against you even if you're getting public assistance. Now, under ECOA, lenders cannot refuse to grant credit to credit-worthy applicants based on their marital status. Requires a spouse's signature on a credit application if the applicant qualifies on their own. Discount or refuse to consider a spouse's income when evaluating a joint credit application. That's very important. Close or change the term of existing account solely because of the change in marital status. I think that is one of those things as well too. Now, current landscape: while overt discrimination based on marital status is prohibited by law, subtle forms of bias may still exist. For example, lenders may make assumptions about a woman's future income potential based on a marital status and or family plans, which could affect their credit decisions. It's important for women to be aware of the rights under the ECOA and report any instances of suspected discrimination. Resources. It also has this listed here, Consumer Financial Protection Bureau provides information that resources about the ECOA and fair lending practices. Federal Trade Commission, FTC, enforces ECOA and other consumer protection laws. The Department of Justice, the DOJ, can file lawsuits in case of systematic ECOA violations. In conclusion, while the legal landscape is significantly improved, women should remain vigilant and potential credit discrimination and be prepared to be advocates for their own rights under the ESC. So that's one of the things I wanted to talk to you guys about. When you get together, make sure that you're getting together for the right reasons. If you're getting separate accounts for the purpose of building up the family, that's a good thing. But if you're setting up to get to the point where it's, I'm planning on, walking out of the door, that's a bad thing. What's the point? What's the purpose of wasting somebody's time? So that's the main reason why you want to get to know somebody for real. So it all goes back to what we talked about, leaving your mother and father and cleaving to one another and working that thing out. You can't listen to other outside people. You can't listen to other outside influences. You got to make sure you do your very best to make sure that you put your best foot forward. So with that being said, I'm going to wrap everything up. If you guys have any questions, make sure you leave them down in the comment section. Hit the like button, hit subscribe, hit share. I appreciate you guys coming out. Did you guys have any questions before we got up out of here? Anything at all before I go? I'm going to give y'all about 2 minutes. And if not, we're going to get up out of here. But make sure you guys check in. Next week, we're going to dive into part 3. Part 3, we're going to get into, we're going to wrap everything up and conclude it because we're going to compare love versus marriage, and we're going to do the contrast. Thank you, Katesh said, awesome live. I appreciate y'all for coming out. And make sure you guys get an opportunity. You hit the like button, hit subscribe, and share. And we're going to be up out of here. I appreciate y'all for coming out.